There comes a point in life when the same struggles keep returning different faces. Same heartbreak, different jobs, same emptiness. You try to be stronger, wiser, more careful, and yet the pain repeats itself. If you've ever asked yourself, why does this keep happening to me? This video is for you. In the language of Buddhist wisdom, this invisible pattern is known as karma. But karma is not punishment. It's not a cosmic penalty. It's a mirror one that quietly reflects what's unresolved within us. And here's the truth no one talks about. Enough karma doesn't last forever. When the lesson is learned, when the soul evolves, something begins to shift, not with noise or drama, but with subtle, sacred clarity. Peace replaces restlessness. Silence no longer feels empty. Old wounds stop knocking, and life begins to feel strangely lighter. In this video, we'll explore 7 quiet signs that your karma is no longer running the show. If even one of them sounds familiar, it may not mean you're stuck. It may mean you're healing. Stay with me until the end, and you may just realize what you thought was falling apart was actually you being set free. Sign 1. Silence becomes a sanctuary. In the early stages of awakening, silence can feel unbearable. Many people unknowingly fill their lives with noise, not just sounds, but distractions, stimulation, endless conversations, and busyness. We scroll, we call, we work, we rush. Because deep down, we fear what might rise to the surface when the noise fades. But when karma begins to dissolve, something beautiful happens. Silence no longer feels empty. It begins to feel like home. This is the first quiet sign of karmic transformation. You no longer need the world to distract you from yourself. You sit with your breath and don't feel restless. You walk alone and don't feel lonely. Silence stops being a void to be filled and becomes a gentle companion that holds you without judgment. There once was a man who had spent his entire life seeking answers, approval, purpose. Every day was filled with noise, debates, books, podcasts, complaints. He believed the world owed him peace. One morning, without plan or effort, he simply stopped. He sat beside a quiet window and listened not to the birds or the street, but to his own breath, and something changed. The stillness he had run from for so long suddenly felt like safety. He didn't need to fix anything. He didn't need to achieve peace. It had been there all along, waiting for him to become still enough to notice. That's the mystery of this sign. When karma rules your mind, silence triggers discomfort because it mirrors everything unresolved inside. But when karma begins to clear, you discover that silence is not the enemy. It's the door. And on the other side is peace, not because your life is perfect, but because your relationship with stillness has changed. When silence becomes a sanctuary, your nervous system calms without needing external soothing. You no longer reach for noise to feel alive. You stop chasing conversations to feel valid. You stop filling space to avoid presence. The soul that once searched outward turns inward and finds rest there. And here's the truth, you won't notice this shift with fireworks or applause. You'll notice it when you're washing dishes and no longer need music. When you're driving and don't need to call someone. When you're sitting alone and the quiet doesn't echo like loneliness anymore, but hums with something sacred. This isn't detachment. It's not isolation. It's the subtle arrival of peace, finally allowed to stay. So, if you've recently found comfort in stillness, If silence no longer unnerves you, but nourishes you, that is not boredom. That is not withdrawal. That is healing. It means your soul is learning to sit in its own presence and be okay. That is where karma loosens its grip. And if this speaks to you, I invite you to pause just for a moment and ask, when was the last time you truly sat with yourself? Not to fix, not to change, but simply to be. If you feel safe in that space now, your healing has already begun. I'd love to hear your experience. Has silence started to feel different for you lately? Leave a comment below, and let's reflect together. And if this resonates with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Awakening Insights, and share it with someone who may need this quiet reminder too. Sign 2. You stop reacting. You start observing. After silence becomes your friend, something even more profound begins to unfold. You stop reacting, not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer driven by the invisible currents of unresolved karma. You start seeing things as they are, not as your pain paints them to be. And that is a quiet revolution. Karma feeds on reactivity. It lives in the quick flare of anger when someone insults you, the sting of rejection, the need to explain yourself, to defend your story, to prove you're right. But when karma softens, so do you. You notice the space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you choose peace. There's a story of a monk walking barefoot through a stone courtyard. A traveler, distracted and hurried, bumped into him. The monk felt dust on his robe, bruise on his knee. The traveler panicked, apologizing profusely. But the monk bowed gently and said, "You didn't push me. Karma moved me, and I observed it pass." He felt no need to be offended, no impulse to make it personal. He simply witnessed the unfolding of a moment. That's not weakness. That's mastery. And you don't need to be a monk to live this way. We all get bumped by careless words, by unfair treatment, by life's little accidents. But the question is, do you always flinch? Or have you learned to pause, breathe, and release the need to be disturbed? When karma is active, your ego reacts to everything. Every comment feels like an attack. Every delay feels like disrespect. Every silence feels like abandonment. But when karma clears, you begin to see more clearly this isn't about you. It's just life moving through its lessons. And you no longer take poison just because someone hands it to you. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you're no longer ruled by what you feel. Emotions still rise, but they don't control your behavior. You observe them. Like clouds passing through a sky you no longer try to hold. You don't need to win every argument, defend every flaw, or chase every explanation. You become okay with simply knowing who you are and letting others misunderstand if they must. And slowly, something beautiful happens. Your energy stops feeding chaos. Arguments dissolve before they start. You spend less time fixing others' perceptions and more time honoring your own clarity. The space around you becomes quieter because the storm inside you has passed. If this sounds familiar, if lately you've found yourself saying, "It's not worth it," or "I see what this is, and I choose peace that's not giving up," that's wisdom. That's freedom. That's your soul, choosing not to bleed every time it's touched. If you've noticed yourself observing more, reacting less, share a moment in the comments when you chose stillness over struggle. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Awakening Insights, now's a perfect time. Let's grow in this journey together, one breath, one pause, one conscious choice at a time. Sign 3. The patterns that once hurt, you stop repeating. After you begin observing instead of reacting, life reveals something even more transformative. Old pain stops showing up in new costumes. The patterns that once haunted your relationships, your work, your health, your sense of self, begin to dissolve, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Karma operates like a loop. It brings us the same lessons in different forms until we finally see them clearly. You meet the same emotional dynamic in a new friendship. You face the same scarcity in a new job. You experience the same heartbreak in a different body. And each time, it feels like bad luck or worse, a curse. But karma isn't cruel. It's persistent. It keeps circling back, not to punish you, but to invite your awareness. There was once a woman who cried every time love left her. Each relationship began with promise and ended with abandonment. One night, instead of blaming the men or blaming fate, she asked a new question. What in me is creating this? That question opened a door. She forgave her mother, whose coldness she had unknowingly mirrored in every lover she chose. She stopped chasing the familiar pain. She stopped needing it to feel real. And soon, something shifted. New people entered her life. People who stayed. People who didn't echo her past. This is the third sign your karma is clearing. The same pain doesn't come back to test you anymore. The same toxic dynamic doesn't find you attractive. The same self-sabotage doesn't seduce you. The loop breaks, not by accident, but because your energy no longer matches the old story. You stop magnetizing what hurt you when you've healed what drew it in. The beauty of this shift is that it's quiet. There's no announcement, no grand turning point. It reveals itself in the way you respond differently to the familiar. You no longer tolerate disrespect. You no longer chase what runs. You no longer shrink to be loved. Instead, you feel solid, clear, at home with yourself. And when your inner world transforms, your outer world follows. You get offered better opportunities. You meet gentler souls. You feel safer in your own skin. The old movie script that kept replaying finally fades, because you no longer audition for roles you've outgrown. If this resonates, if you've noticed that certain patterns aren't repeating anymore, that life feels new somehow, trust it. That's not a fluke. That's growth. That's healing. That's karma losing its grip on your story. What's one painful cycle you've noticed has quietly ended in your life? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear how your healing is unfolding. And if this message speaks to you, let it ripple by liking this video, subscribing to Awakening Insights, and sending it to someone who's still stuck in a loop they don't yet recognize. Sometimes, one quiet realization is all it takes to start a whole new chapter. Sign 4, you feel strangely protected. As the patterns begin to fade, and the old wounds no longer knock on your door, you may start to notice something subtle but powerful. Life no longer feels like it's working against you. In fact, it begins to feel oddly aligned. You're not untouchable, but trouble seems to pass you by. Harm misses its target. Opportunities appear without chasing. You feel guided, even when you don't know why. This is the fourth sign. Your karma is clearing. Protection begins to arise, not through effort or defense, but through presence. Something in the unseen starts working in your favor, not because you demanded it, but because your energy is no longer attracting disturbance. There's a story of a young man walking through the forest. Unaware, he nearly stepped on a coiled snake hidden under the leaves. But before his foot could land, a gust of wind pushed him off balance. He stumbled sideways and saw the snake slither away. He sat there, stunned not because he fell, but because he didn't understand how he had been spared. He hadn't prayed for it. He hadn't earned it. Yet something had intervened. That something was the absence of karmic weight. When karma rules your path, you walk with spiritual baggage, and that baggage pulls in lessons, friction, and hard knocks. But when karma clears, that weight lifts. Your steps become lighter. Your presence becomes less magnetic to chaos. And the divine, whatever you believe that to be, can finally intervene without resistance. This doesn't mean you'll never face challenges again, but it does mean that challenges won't hit as hard. You'll get gentle redirections instead of painful breakdowns. The lesson comes softly, because you're now soft enough to receive it. You'll sense that you're no longer pushing against the wind, because the wind is now behind you. When you're karmically protected, the doors that used to stay shut open without a knock. People who once drained you fade from your life without drama. Accidents seem to miss by inches. You start arriving in the right places at the right times, not through planning, but through alignment. And what's most humbling is that this protection doesn't come from armor. It comes from light. Your clarity becomes your shield. Your peace becomes your path. You don't need to fight for safety. It begins to follow you. If you've recently felt this quiet grace, if things have been working out even when you didn't try, or you avoided a mess you didn't even see coming, pause and honor it. That's not coincidence. That's karmic release. That's a life no longer tangled in debts of the soul. Have you ever had a moment where you felt protected by something unseen? A close call, a graceful detour. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how life has whispered to you. And if this message resonates, give it a like, subscribe to Awakening Insights, and pass it on. Someone out there may need to be reminded that they're not alone. Grace has already begun. Sign 5 others. Begin to mirror your inner peace. Once you feel that quiet protection around you, another subtle shift unfolds. The world no longer feels as harsh. People around you start behaving differently. Even those who used to argue, misunderstand, or project their chaos onto you suddenly soften in your presence. Not because they've changed, but because you have. This is the 5th sign that your karma is clearing. Others begin to reflect your inner calm. Your energy no longer invites conflict. It radiates stillness. You don't have to say anything special, defend yourself, or fix anyone. Your presence speaks for itself, and it speaks peace. There's a story about an elderly gardener who worked quietly behind a small meditation hall. He never raised his voice. He never rushed. He simply tended to the earth with gentle hands and a soft spirit. Strangers who passed by him would fall silent. Children waved at him with a kind of reverence. Even people filled with anger or grief paused near him, and somehow forgot what had weighed them down. One day, someone asked him, "Why do I feel calm around you?" He smiled and replied, "Because I no longer carry pain." When we carry unresolved karma, it leaks into our energy, whether we mean to or not. People feel it. They react to it, even if they don't understand it. That's why conflict often finds us when we are still in inner turmoil. But when that burden is lifted, your presence becomes medicine. You walk into a room, and the atmosphere softens. Not because you demand respect, but because you no longer radiate pain. This doesn't make you perfect. You'll still have boundaries. You'll still walk away when needed. But you won't need to control, defend, or protect your energy constantly. Your peace will speak before you do. It will do the work for you. When others begin to mirror your calmness, you'll notice that even the people who used to trigger you no longer have the same grip on your emotions. Misunderstandings fade faster. Tension doesn't stick. Conversations feel easier. And even if someone brings drama, it doesn't stick to you anymore, it just passes through. This is the power of karmic clarity. Your healing isn't just for you. It changes the space around you. It makes you a lighthouse, not by preaching, but by being. If you've recently felt people responding to you with more kindness, more softness, or if you've noticed that your presence seems to ease the tension in a room, pause and honor that. It's not just that they're different. You're different. You've shifted. And your energy is now guiding others without a single word. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone told you, "I feel peaceful around you," without you trying? Share it in the comments. And if this message resonates with you, please give it a like, subscribe to Awakening Insights, and help us grow this circle of calm by sending it to someone whose energy deserves to be seen and honored too. Sign 6. You desire nothing, yet everything flows to you. After your energy softens and others begin to mirror your peace, you may experience one of the most surprising shifts of all. You stop chasing things. You no longer burn with that restless hunger for more success, more validation, more love, more answers, and paradoxically, the moment you stop grasping, life begins to give. This is the 6th sign your karma is clearing. You desire nothing, yet everything begins to flow your way. It's not magic. It's not coincidence. It's alignment. You are no longer trying to force life to obey your will. Instead, life begins to respond to your state of being. Desire itself isn't the problem. When rooted in joy and curiosity, desire can inspire beautiful movement, but karmic desire is different. It's born from lack, from wound, from "I'm not enough unless I have this." It's loud. It's desperate. It manipulates. It grasps. It suffers. That kind of desire reinforces the very karma you're trying to heal. There was once a seeker who spent years praying for riches. He begged the heavens. He made vision boards. He worked himself sick, always believing that if he just tried harder, he would finally be rewarded. But his cup remained empty. One day, exhausted and disillusioned, he walked to the river, sat down, and let it all go. He no longer asked. He no longer needed. He simply watched the moon shimmer in the water and smiled. That night, strangers brought him food. A week later, a nobleman offered him gold, not because he chased it, but because he had become still, and the world flowed toward that stillness. That's the paradox. When you release the attachment, the energy you were once chasing begins to return not as a transaction, but as a reflection. Life mirrors your state. When you radiate contentment, life doesn't withhold, it aligns. When you stop shouting your needs into the void, The silence echoes with provision. You no longer manipulate outcomes. You no longer chase love to feel worthy. You no longer exhaust yourself proving your value. Instead, you rest in the fullness of what already is. And from that place of calm sufficiency, blessings come not because you need them, but because you no longer block them. This doesn't mean you have no goals or dreams. It means those dreams don't own you anymore. You can walk toward them with grace, not hunger. You can welcome what arrives and release what doesn't. That's the ease that replaces karmic urgency. If this resonates, if lately you've noticed that things come more naturally, that you're not pushing so hard, and yet the right people, opportunities, or resources seem to find you pause and honor that, that's not luck. That's a new kind of magnetism. That's peace calling life back to you. Have you ever stopped chasing something only to have it appear when you least expected it? Share that moment in the comments. I'd love to hear how surrender has shifted your life. And if this speaks to your heart, please like the video, subscribe to Awakening Insights, and share it with someone who's still trying to force what is already waiting for them to let go. Sign 7. You become grateful for the pain that once broke you. As you stop chasing and life begins to flow with ease, one final sign emerges quietly, yet profoundly. You look back at your pain, and instead of anger, you feel gratitude. The betrayal that once shattered your trust, the loss that left you hollow, the endings that brought you to your knees. Somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, your heart softened toward them. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and instead whisper, "Thank you." This is the 7th and most sacred sign your karma has been cleared. You become grateful for the very experiences that once tore you apart. Not because they were easy, not because you deserved them, but because they awakened something in you that peace alone never could. There was a man who once stood at a grave, overwhelmed with grief. For years, he cursed the loss that had broken his world. He replayed the pain, the injustice, the emptiness. But one morning, he returned to that same place, and instead of rage, he knelt in reverence. He whispered, "Because of this, I found my soul. Because of this, I woke up." Karmic healing isn't just about letting go of suffering. It's about transforming your relationship with it. When karma is unresolved, pain feels like punishment. But when karma clears, pain becomes a portal. It opens something within you that had been hidden behind comfort, behind control, behind illusion. You start to see that the person who abandoned you taught you how to stay with yourself, that the hardship that broke you also rebuilt you on a foundation that's no longer fragile, that the version of you who once cried out in confusion became the version of you who now sits in clarity. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, gentle, sacred. One day, you find yourself telling the story of what once hurt you, and you're no longer trembling. You're not angry. You're not ashamed. You're calm, clear, and oddly thankful. You realize that karma was never here to ruin you. It was here to rip away what wasn't true, to burn down the illusions that kept you stuck, to guide you painfully, patiently back to yourself. And when the fire dies down, what remains is grace. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because your perception did. So if you've started to look at your past with soft eyes, if you found yourself saying, "I wouldn't be who I am without what I went through," That's not nostalgia. That's awakening. That's the moment you stop fearing pain. You honor it. You bow to it. Because you've outgrown the need to resist it. What's one painful experience you now see as a turning point in your growth? Share it in the comments. I'd be honored to witness your story. And if this message brought you clarity, please like this video, subscribe to Awakening Insights, and share it with someone who still sees their pain as punishment. They may not know yet, it's the very thing that's preparing their liberation. You've just walked through 7 quiet signs of karmic release, not loud victories, but gentle inner shifts. And maybe, as you listened, you saw parts of your own story reflected back, not as flaws, but as proof that you've been evolving all along. Healing rarely announces itself. It whispers. It reveals itself in the way you respond, the way you breathe, the way you forgive and begin again. Clearing karma isn't about escaping the past. It's about outgrowing what once bound you. It's not perfection. It's presence. It's the quiet return to your own soul, unburdened, honest, awake. If something in this touched you, take a breath and let it settle. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just becoming who you were always meant to be without the noise, without the loops, without the weight. If you feel called to reflect deeper, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hold space for your journey. And if this message found you at the right time, consider subscribing to Awakening Insights. We explore healing, inner peace, and the quiet truths that free us. You're always welcome here. This path is better when we walk it together.